Britney Spears had the pop crown locked down until she was completely blindsided by a 42-year-old veteran who bypassed the teenagers entirely, executing the first great chart coup of the new millennium. Welcome back to the main Pop Girl. I'm James, and today we're looking past the nostalgia and diving into the raw sales data to see who actually stole the crown in 2000. Because at the turn of the century, the traditional rules of the Billboard Hot 100 were being actively warped by record labels who were deliberately killing off the CD single. The music industry was enjoying its most profitable era in history, but the entire business model was about to collapse. The golden age of physical CD sales was colliding head-on with the dawn of digital MP3 files. Fans were suddenly figuring out how to download music online, label executives were panicking, and the traditional Hot 100 formula was fracturing. At the 2000 World Music Awards, Michael Jackson and Mariah Carey were officially crowned the best-selling artists of the entire millennium. That was the benchmark. The new generation of pop girls didn't just want a fleeting top 40 hit, they wanted immortal, global dominance. But navigating this new digital battlefield was chaotic, and when you look at the actual chart data for the year 2000, it becomes immediately clear that the battle lines were drawn, because what was conquering America was completely different from what was dominating the UK. If you look strictly at the US Billboard Hot 100, the Y2K pop explosion was facing intense competition from R&B royalty. Janet Jackson claimed the #1 spot for 3 massive weeks with Doesn't Really Matter from the Nutty Professor soundtrack. Mariah Carey snagged 1 week at the top with Thank God I Found You featuring 98 Degrees. And Aaliyah captured a #1 with Try Again, making history as the first song ever to top the Hot 100 based purely on radio airplay, reaching an audience of over 92 million listeners and proving just how rapidly the power of the physical CD single was declining in the States. But while Aaliyah was making history on US radio, the UK charts across the pond were a completely different ecosystem, heavily fractured by Eurodance and the explosive fallout of the Spice Girls. I vividly remember being 17, watching The Box after school, and hearing Sonique's It Feels So Good vibrating out of Vauxhall courses across the north of England. The sonic innovation happening locally was staggering. You had Melanie C shattering expectations for a solo Spice campaign, shifting over 400,000 copies of Never Be the Same Again, featuring Lisa Left Eye Lopez. And then you had Kylie Minogue ending her indie wilderness years with Spinning Around, aggressively reclaiming her global club authority. Between the American R&B veterans, the solo Spice Girls, and Kylie's monumental return, the market was wildly saturated. And that fragmentation is exactly why our powerhouses of the year ultimately fell just short of the absolute crown. Because to win in 2000, an unforgettable video or a regional smash just wasn't enough. You needed transatlantic synergy. You had to dominate US radio while simultaneously commanding the UK's physical sales. And that brings us to the 3 women who actually managed to fight on both fronts, starting with the reigning princess who walked directly into a label-mandated trap. Taking the bronze medal is the reigning princess of pop, Britney Spears. Culturally, her sophomore era is an undeniable phenomenon. She debuted with record-shattering numbers, easily securing a Billboard 200 #1 with over 1.3 million copies sold in the first week. Over in the UK, she was unstoppable. On January 29, Born to Make You Happy debuted at the top of the official charts, earning her a second UK #1, and it's still my absolute favorite single of hers from that era. Fast forward a mere 3.5 months to May 13, and she was already back at #1 with the lead single from her new album, Oops, I Did It Again. So why is she only #3? It comes down to a fatal mix of label strategy and oversaturation. Britney dropped her sophomore album less than a year and a half after her debut. She simply didn't give the general public room to breathe. Not that they wanted room to breathe, I should say. But the real chart killer was her label, Jive Records. They intentionally restricted physical CD sales in the US to force fans to buy the full, expensive album. Now, to be fair, that strategy worked brilliantly for album sales. It produced numbers that are quite frankly difficult difficult to comprehend today. Oops, I Did It Again shifted 500,000 copies in its first 24 hours on sale. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with a staggering 1.3 million copies sold in its first week. That made it the fastest-selling album by a female artist in SoundScan history, a massive record she held for 15 solid years until Adele finally broke it in 2015. It even held the number 2 spot for 15 consecutive weeks after its debut. Jive had created an absolute album-selling juggernaut, but in doing so, they completely tanked Britney's Hot 100 dominance. Looking back at the numbers today is genuinely incredulous. Can you believe we live in a world where Oops, I Did It Again peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100? It's crazy. And Erica, what were you thinking? Compared to the colossal success of her debut, Jive actually considered that a minor disappointment. And the subsequent singles suffered the same exact fate. Lucky only managed to peak at number 23. Stronger peaked at number 11. And the final single, Don't Let Me Be the Last to Know, completely failed to chart on the Hot 100 altogether. Because of that restricted release strategy, Oops stalled out at number 55 on the Billboard year-end singles chart. She had an absolute cultural monopoly, but on the US singles chart, she was actively being outsung by her biggest rival. Taking the silver medal is the undisputed vocal powerhouse of the Y2K teen era, Christina Aguilera. While Britney was rushing out the second album and fighting radio rules, Christina was playing a brilliant long game. She was still aggressively promoting her debut album, letting the eras breathe and separating herself from the pack with one undeniable weapon, her voice. By leaning into her vocal acrobatics, she conquered US radio in a way Britney couldn't that year. Christina spent 2 weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100 with What a Girl Wants, and Come On Over Baby was an incredible single, my favorite from her debut. She proved she wasn't just an American phenomenon, tying the longest run for a female artist at number 1 on the UK singles chart that year, dominating for a massive 4 weeks. But if you want to know exactly why Christina takes the silver medal over Britney, you just have to look at her sheer output and industry validation. It started in February, when she pulled off a massive upset at the Grammys, taking home Best New Artist directly over the heavy favorite, Britney Spears.
Oh my God, you guys.
Christina used that momentum to completely blanket the market. She performed at the Super Bowl halftime show, launched a massive global tour, and then did something incredibly ambitious. In September, she dropped her Spanish language album, Mi Reflejo. It wasn't just a side project, it was a blockbuster. It topped the Billboard Latin charts for 19 consecutive weeks, became the biggest selling Latin pop album of the entire year, and earned her a Latin Grammy for Best Female Vocal Album. A mere 1 month later, she released her third studio project, My Kind of Christmas, which shot to number 1 on the US holiday charts, and she wrapped the year with her own ABC television special. Her commercial dominance was so complete that Billboard officially named Christina Aguilera their top female pop act of 2000. Christina successfully outcharted Britney on the US singles front, secured the Grammys, and proved she had the multi-market appeal to survive the teen pop bubble. She did absolutely everything right, but she couldn't outrun a pop culture institution. Because while the teenagers were fighting over the Hot 100, a veteran was about to hijack the entire globe. The main pop girl of the year 2000 is Madonna. At 42 years old, sitting in the absolute epicenter of the biggest teen pop explosion in history, she looked at the landscape and decided not to compete with Britney and Christina. Instead, she completely bypassed them. Her weapon wasn't a schoolgirl outfit or a vocal run, it was pure, unapologetic sonic innovation. Teaming up with French producer Millennium, Madonna embraced the cutting-edge sounds of French house and delivered an album that was astounding in its sonic palette. The production was a brilliant collision of acoustic guitars, acid house beats, and vocoders. She didn't just use auto-tune to fix pitches, she employed it as an outright instrument. By blending futuristic electronic music with traditional Americana, she created a sound that was distinctly, unmistakably Madonna. The market rewarded the risk. She dropped this highly experimental record and immediately secured a Billboard 200 #1 album. And the title track wasn't just a disposable dance anthem. Beneath the heavy vocoders, the lyrics carried subtle political and social undertones, reiterating the unifying power of music. And it absolutely unified the globe, topping the charts in an incredible 25 countries. Here in America, music debuted at number 41 on the Hot 100 based solely only on radio play. But the moment the physical singles actually hit the shelves, the sales exploded. It shifted over 156,000 units in a single week, dethroning Janet Jackson, rocketing straight to #1. It was her 12th US chart topper, her first since 1995, and, incredulously looking back from 2026, it was her last #1 single to date. Music ultimately landed at number 17 on the US year-end chart, officially outcharting the biggest tracks from both Britney and Christina. But the UK data is where she fully cemented the crown. She scored multiple #1 singles, first with her electronic tinge cover of American Pie, and then with the monumental title track, Music. That single triggered an agonizingly close chart battle in the UK, debuting at #1 with 115,000 copies sold, beating Spiller's iconic Groove Jet by a margin of just 1,000 sales. That razor-thin victory was historic. It made Madonna the very first solo female artist in history to collect 10 UK #1 singles. The album itself hit #1 for 2 weeks, and ultimately, Music finished as the 10th biggest album of the entire year in the UK, the highest placement of any female on our list. In a year defined by manufactured teenage superstars, she proved that the ultimate pop crown doesn't go to the artist who perfectly follows the trend. It goes to the artist who invents the next one. She survived the Y2K explosion by rewriting the rulebook, and right now, in 2026, she's attempting to do it all over again. While the industry is bracing for a standard legacy comeback, the data behind her reunion with Stuart Price suggests something far more aggressive than a simple nostalgia trip. Everyone is expecting a safe disco sequel, but they are completely wrong about the direction she's taking. To see exactly how she's planning to hijack the charts for a 4th decade and why her upcoming era is about to defy every expectation we have for a legacy act, click here.